The Book of Psalms, chapter 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The question rises in the middle of danger, not comfort. David is not observing life from a safe distance. Enemies surround him, voices accuse him, and threats appear able to close every way of escape. Yet before naming what pursues him, he names who God is: light when the road seems dark, salvation when human strength is not enough, a stronghold when everything that once seemed steady begins to shake. Fear is present, but it no longer holds the center of the scene. The Lord is at the center. This is the tension running through the entire psalm. How can a threatened heart remain confident? How can someone surrounded by uncertainty desire one thing instead of scattering into 1,000 attempts at control? David does not offer an answer detached from reality. He knows the noise of an army, the betrayal of people close to him, the delay of answers, and the loneliness of someone who must wait. His faith does not erase these experiences. It rearranges them. A threat remains a threat, but it is no longer the final authority. Danger speaks, but God speaks more deeply. The setting is not described in every detail, and perhaps that is why so many generations have recognized themselves in these words. The enemy may have one face or many. It may be a real persecution, unexpected news, the illness of someone loved, the loss of a safe place, guilt returning in the night, or a future covered in fog. David gives voice to all those hours by declaring that there is a light that does not depend on sunrise. When circumstances do not change, the presence of God can still change the way we move through them. Picture the night over the hills. The fires of an enemy camp are scattered in the distance. Footsteps and voices travel on the wind. Every sound may announce someone drawing near. In such a situation, the body prepares to flee or fight. The mind rehearses losses, calculates routes, and turns possibilities into dark certainties. In that setting, David says, "Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear." He does not claim that the army is imaginary. He declares that his heart does not have to surrender to the command of fear. Fear often arrives before the facts. It takes a small sign and builds an entire destiny. One closed door comes to mean that every door will close. One failure seems to prove that change is impossible. Silence is interpreted as abandonment. Fear feeds on what has not happened and demands that we suffer in advance. David interrupts that movement by remembering 3 names for God's action: light, salvation, and stronghold. Each word confronts one dimension of anxiety. Light allows us to see. Salvation reminds us that help exists. A stronghold gives us a place to remain. Light does not mean every detail of the road will be revealed at once. Often it reaches only the next step. In the wilderness, Israel did not receive a complete map for every journey, but a pillar showing when to move and when to stay. God's light does not feed the illusion of control. It sustains obedience. David may not have known how every threat would end, but he knew to whom he belonged. That certainty was enough to keep him from mistaking darkness for absence. When evildoers advance to devour his flesh, David says they are the ones who stumble and fall. The image changes direction. Those who appeared to rule the scene lose their footing, not because David has become invulnerable, but because the outcome was never entirely in the hands of his pursuers. There are limits human power cannot cross. There are decisions of God no conspiracy can cancel. Faith rests on that sovereignty, even before seeing the fall of what threatens it. Perhaps the fiercest battle is not outside, but within. Memory gathers old defeats. Imagination projects new losses. Shame accuses, "You are not strong enough." Faith answers without denying weakness, "The Lord is the stronghold of my life." The stronghold is not David's personality, his military experience, or his ability to inspire followers. It is God himself. That is why confidence can exist alongside trembling hands. Biblical courage is not the absence of emotion. It is the decision to remain turned toward God while emotion tries to pull us away. The first revelation of the psalm is simple and deep. Fear grows smaller when God once again occupies the central place. It may not immediately weaken as a feeling, but it loses the right to rule. The night may remain dark, the fires may still burn in the distance, and yet an inward light begins to guide the heart. That light leads David to an unexpected desire. Surrounded by many needs, he asks for one thing. One thing I ask from the Lord, and this I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to seek him in his temple. It would be understandable if David first asked for the end of his enemies, the restoration of peace, or a visible victory. But his central request is not a change of setting, it is nearness. He desires to dwell, behold, and seek. Instead of making God's presence a means of obtaining safety, he realizes that the presence itself is the deepest safety. The words, one thing, do not mean David had no other needs. They mean that all of them found order around one center. A divided heart runs in many directions. It wants a guarantee for tomorrow, an explanation for yesterday, the approval of others, immediate relief, and control of outcomes. When none of these can be secured, the soul becomes exhausted. David gathers his scattered desires and gives them one priority: to be before the Lord. To behold the beauty of God is more than to look at something pleasing. It is to recognize his character, holiness that cannot be corrupted, mercy that does not grow weary, justice that cannot be bought, and faithfulness that does not change with the seasons. In days of danger, reality appears distorted. Evil seems larger than it is, and God seems far away. Contemplation corrects that perspective. It does not ignore the wounds, but it keeps the wounds from becoming the only thing we see. In the day of trouble, the psalm says, God will hide him in his shelter, keep him in the secret place of his tent, and set him high upon a rock. The images gather: shelter, tent, rock. First, care, then intimacy, finally, firmness. God's hiding place is not a permanent escape from reality. It is the place where identity is preserved until reality can be faced without being consumed by it. There are times when the greatest need is not an answer, but a shelter. The mind wants to solve everything immediately, while the soul needs to breathe before God. In the secret place, there is no need to appear strong. Words may be few, tears need no explanation. The presence receives what we cannot organize. Slowly, what arrived as confusion begins to find a name. Fear is acknowledged, pain is surrendered, guilt is confessed, and hope is remembered again. To be set upon a rock does not mean being raised up for display. It means receiving stability. The ground of the heart, once shifting, finds support. Then David imagines his head lifted above his enemies and offers sacrifices with shouts of joy. The transformation is striking. The man who saw an army now sees himself worshipping. The threat is still part of the story, but it no longer determines the ending he beholds. Faith rehearses gratitude before every circumstance has been resolved. This seeking requires movement. David says, "One thing I ask, and also, this I seek." Desire without pursuit becomes only a beautiful intention. Seeking means returning to the Word when the mind would rather feed dark scenarios. It means honest prayer when the impulse is to hide. It means remaining in the community of faith when pain suggests isolation. It means making room for silence in order to listen rather than filling every space with noise, not to purchase God's favor, but to open our eyes to the presence already calling us. At the center of adversity, David discovers that the decisive question is not how many enemies surround him, but whose presence he seeks. That discovery changes the direction of the psalm. After firm declarations and focused desire, his voice becomes a plea. Confidence does not remove the need to cry out. Hear my voice when I call. Lord, be merciful to me and answer me. The shift in tone is almost abrupt. The same man who said he would not fear now asks to be heard. This is not a contradiction. It is the truth of a living faith. There are days when certainty is declared with strength, and nights when prayer emerges as an urgent plea. Both can live in the same heart. David hears an inward invitation. Seek my face. And he answers, Your face, Lord, I will seek. God is not treated as an impersonal force or merely the solution to a problem. To seek his face is to desire relationship, attention, and fellowship. A servant may seek only the king's hand and what it gives. A child also wants the face, the sign of presence and welcome. David wants the God who saves, not only the salvation God offers. But this search touches a fear deeper than the army. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. The greatest terror is not losing the battle. It is feeling abandoned by God. Perhaps David remembers his own sins, decisions that wounded others, and moments when he tried to solve everything in his own strength. When silence lasts, guilt can interpret delay as rejection. The soul wonders whether it has crossed a final boundary and whether the door of mercy has closed. The psalm does not hide this vulnerability. David calls God his help and pleads, Do not reject me or forsake me. The prayer is not carefully polished. It is the speech of someone who knows the difference between knowing a truth and feeling it. He knows God is faithful, but asks for that faithfulness to become perceptible again. There is deep freedom here. Scripture does not require a wounded person to pretend to be serene before God. It invites that person to bring unrest to God himself. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. David chooses the most basic human relationship to describe the limit of abandonment. Father and mother represent origin, care, and belonging. Even if the most fundamental bonds fail, there is a welcome that does not fail. God is not indifferent to human rejection. He receives those who have been left without a place. The word receive carries movement, like someone who sees the forsaken and draws them near. David then asks for direction. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. He does not ask only for deliverance, he asks for formation. Danger can awaken shortcuts, answering lies with lies, violence with violence, manipulation with manipulation. A straight path is a path of integrity, where David's adversaries will not find proof for their accusations in his choices. He wants to come out of the crisis not only alive, but faithful. This request reveals spiritual maturity. Under pressure, we want God to remove the people who threaten us. David also desires protection, but he understands that an external battle may reveal an internal one. What good is it to defeat enemies and lose the heart? What good is it to escape the trap and become like the one who set it? God's direction preserves more than reputation. It preserves the soul. False witnesses rise and breathe out violence. Words can wound before any weapon is raised. An accusation repeated often may sound true to many ears. David cannot control the voices around him, but he can choose the voice that guides his steps. He asks for a clear path because he knows that, under pressure, impulsive reactions seem justified. The presence that sheltered him now also corrects him. God's silence, then, is not empty space. In it, desires are purified, wounds come into the light, and paths are taught. David began by asking God to listen. Now he becomes willing to listen. Prayer ceases to be only a request for changed circumstances and becomes openness to being changed within them. Still, waiting is heavy. and under that weight the psalm draws near to its deepest moment. I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. David does not say only that one day in a distant reality God's goodness will be known. He expects to see it in the territory of life. This declaration comes after fear, desire, crying out, the possibility of abandonment, and false witnesses. Hope was not born because the conflicts disappeared. It was born because, in their midst, David saw the character of God again. David's sentence confronts a common temptation, believing that goodness belongs only to the past. When the present hurts, we remember old stories as though God acted in another age and is now far away. The psalm brings goodness before our eyes. I will see. The memory of faithfulness becomes expectation. The God who was light will continue to illuminate. The God who welcomed will continue to sustain. The God who taught the path will not abandon the traveler halfway down the road. But between the promise and the seeing lies an interval. That is why the decisive word comes, wait for the Lord. In biblical language, waiting is not folding our arms and counting empty days. It is remaining joined to the one for whom we wait. It is continuing to obey when the outcome has not appeared. It is guarding against delay, turning hope into bitterness. It is refusing solutions that require leaving God's way. Waiting reveals what we love and trust. When the answer delays, hidden idols begin to speak. The need for control demands shortcuts. The approval of people demands compromises. The desire for immediate relief offers choices that will later demand a high price. Waiting for the Lord dismantles these false promises. Every day of faithfulness declares that God is worth more than a solution obtained far from him. This does not make waiting easy. There are mornings when hope feels renewed and afternoons when weariness returns. There are prayers full of words and others made only of sighs. There are moments when someone else must remind us of what we can no longer say. So David speaks to himself and to everyone listening. Be strong and take heart. He does not command the heart to create strength from nothing. Strength is born as we wait for the Lord. Think of a seed under the soil. On the surface, nothing appears to happen. There are no leaves, fruit, or visible signs. In the dark, however, the shell breaks and a root begins to reach for depth. Waiting often looks like this silence. What will be seen later begins in hiding. God works in regions of the heart that do not appear in the first answers. He prepares the capacity to receive what haste might destroy. David repeats, wait for the Lord. The repetition is not excess, it is mercy. The heart forgets quickly. After a moment of trust, new news can reignite fear. Then truth must be heard again. Wait, do not hand the future over to fear. Do not turn delay into abandonment. Do not call darkness absence. Light remains light, even while the eyes are still adjusting. At the end, we realize that the climax of Psalm 27 is not the described fall of the enemies or a scene of military triumph. It is a heart that, still waiting, chooses to trust. Everything that came before is rearranged by this certainty. I will see the goodness of the Lord. The army is no longer the final image. The final image is a man remaining before God. His heart strengthened by a goodness he still waits to see fully. The psalm begins with a question, whom shall I fear? That question does not ask for a list of possible threats. It confronts the authority we give them. If the Lord is light, darkness will not have the final word. If he is salvation, danger does not possess absolute control. If he is a stronghold, the ground never disappears completely. David's confidence is not in the prediction of an easy road, but in God's constant presence on any road. This light also reveals the heart itself. It illuminates fear, but also scattered desires. It shows the need for shelter, The wound of abandonment, the temptation of shortcuts, and the weariness of waiting. God does not shine only to expose. He shines to heal and guide. Under his light, David learns that courage is not controlling every outcome. It is desiring the presence above control, seeking God's face in silence, and remaining on the path of integrity. Many centuries later, the image of light would reach an even greater depth in Jesus, who called himself the light of the world. In him, God does not merely send direction from far away, he draws near to human darkness. Jesus knows opposition, false witnesses, the abandonment of friends, and the violence of enemies. At the cross, he passes through the deepest shadow. In the resurrection, he reveals that not even death can extinguish the light of God. For that reason, the hope of the psalm is not optimistic thinking. It is bound to the God who enters history, sustains the vulnerable, and transforms the place of apparent defeat. The light does not promise that we will never cross valleys. It promises that the valley will not be our final home. Salvation does not mean the absence of tears. It means no tear is unseen, and pain will not have the last word. Perhaps today the heart stands before its own enemy fires. Perhaps there is a decision without an answer, a prolonged wait, an accusation difficult to bear, or an absence that still hurts. Psalm 27 does not ask you to call it small. It invites you to place something greater at the center. Before naming the threat again, name who God is: light, salvation, stronghold. Then allow the many requests to find one center. Among all that could change, one thing can be sought now: the presence of God. A room can become a meeting place. A prayer interrupted by tears can be true worship. A verse remembered in the middle of the night can be the next illuminated step. The hiding place does not need to be visible in order to be real. If God seems silent, the psalm offers words for the wait. Hear my voice. Do not hide your face from me. Teach me your way. There is no shame in repeating this cry. Faith is not measured by the absence of questions, but by the direction in which the questions are carried. David brings all of them to God and remains there long enough to hear the invitation, "Seek my face." And if old abandonments say that no one will come, remember, the Lord will receive me. God's welcome does not depend on the perfection of the one who arrives. David approaches as a needy servant, aware of his frailty. Mercy is not the wage of those who never failed. It is shelter for those who turn their faces to the Lord. Finally, when no immediate answer can be given, the most courageous decision remains: wait. Not an empty waiting, but one filled with attention. Wait while the heart grows roots. Wait without selling integrity. Wait believing that God's goodness can still be seen in the land of the living. Every day of remaining becomes a quiet testimony that fear has not won. Psalm 27 ends without telling us what happened to the enemies. We do not know how much time passed before circumstances changed. The text closes in the interval, the place where many of us live. Perhaps this is its deepest gift. It shows that faith can have a memorable conclusion before the crisis has a visible conclusion. The heart finds its ending in God while the story is still unfolding. Night remains over the hills for a while. The distant fires can still be seen, but now another image occupies the foreground. A lamp burning inside the tent, small before the vast darkness, yet sufficient to reveal the face of the one who waits. The future has not been explained. The whole path has not appeared. Even so, there is light to remain, a presence to seek and goodness to await. So the question remains, when fear says darkness is all that exists, which voice will your heart choose to repeat? The Lord is my light and my salvation, and sustained by that truth, wait, be strong, let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord.